General Hospital spoilers suggest that Michael Corinthos may know who shot Drew Kane. Tracy Quartermaine promised Michael that she would keep it a secret that she saw him at Drew's house just before he was shot. That could imply that Michael is responsible for shooting Drew, but there is most likely more to the story. It is possible that Michael witnessed the perpetrator shoot Drew, and is keeping quiet about it. Michael would undoubtedly want to protect someone, and he would go to great lengths to conceal the crime. Michael Corinthos may have been on his way to confront Drew Kane. He might have wanted to confirm Drew's reunion with Willow Tate, and encourage him to let her go. Although Willow is not in her right mind right now, he understands that Drew is toxic to her. Before he could go inside, he noticed a blast from inside the house as well as a second blast from his car. Although it was dark outside, he couldn't see the shooter from his car, but he did notice someone leaving Drew's house. Michael Corinthos may know who Drew Kane's shooter is. Michael could have been taken aback to see his cousin, Danny Morgan, fleeing the scene of the crime with a gun in hand. Michael would have been too stunned to move, and unable to comprehend that Danny had shot Drew. Michael wouldn't have time to react quickly enough to catch Danny, who had fled. Tracy arrived at Drew's house just as Michael was leaving it. Michael would need to ensure that Danny was not implicated in the crime. Danny Morgan has a great reason for shooting Drew Kane. Danny used to think of Drew as a father, especially when Drew thought he was Jason Morgan. Furthermore, even after it was revealed that he was Jason's twin brother, he and Drew remained close. Drew would have done anything for Danny. Drew's decision to turn on Danny would be extremely hurtful, and the fact that he is keeping his sister, Scout Quartermaine, from him was the final straw. Drew also attempted to arrest Danny for taking Scout from camp, which added fuel to the fire. Danny believed that getting rid of Drew was the only way to save his sister and keep them together. Michael Corinthos must make sure the truth is out. Michael will go to any length to ensure that no one knows Danny is Drew's shooter. He would begin to leave tracks to ensure that the crime was covered up. He can explain to Tracy why he was at Drew's right before he was shot, as Tracy may believe Michael is responsible. Michael wouldn't even want to tell Tracy the truth about Danny's actions, because he believes that knowing would put Danny in danger. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Do you think Michael knows who shot Drew? Was Danny the one who shot Drew? Will Michael ensure that the truth about Danny never gets out? Keep watching General Hospital, which airs on ABC weekdays, to find out what happens next. Don't forget to check back here on a regular basis for the most up-to-date General Hospital information, news, and spoilers. General Hospital spoilers suggest that as everyone in the PCPD scrambles to figure out who shot Drew Kane, Michael Corinthos may have witnessed everything when the gun was fired. Will he keep quiet about the entire situation depending on who pulled the trigger? Was Michael Corinthos at the crime scene? Given the circumstances, Michael could easily decide to go to Drew's house and confront him again. Having said that, something may have prevented him from entering the premises. Michael, like Trina Robinson and Kai Taylor, may have fled the scene to avoid being implicated in what he witnessed. He may have even fled the scene because he did not want to tell the police what he saw. A father protects his children. General Hospital spoilers for Wednesday, September 3rd reveal that Michael returned to the Quartermaine mansion soaked. When he got home, he noticed Brooklyn Quartermaine talking to Wiley Corinthos because the little boy couldn't sleep. Michael seemed determined to keep Willow Tate away from Wiley and Amelia Corinthos. However, does he have any additional concerns as a result of something he witnessed that night? Michael has a bad history with Drew, so he may keep quiet if he sees someone like Alexis Davis or Curtis Ashford pull the trigger. But what about the mother of his children? He'd be torn. He wouldn't want to report her, but he also wouldn't want her around the kids while she continued to make poor decisions. Having said that, there is speculation that Colette Moreau was to blame. If Colette was wearing a mask, would Michael believe Willow was pulling the trigger even though she wasn't? Did Michael witness Drew's shooting? Share your thoughts. Tune in to the ABC soap every day and visit this website frequently for the most recent General Hospital updates, spoilers, and news. The atmosphere in Port Charles had become more intense than usual, with tension simmering beneath every whispered conversation and stolen glance. Michael Corinthos became restless, pacing the dimly lit hallway outside the Metro Court conference room, his phone clutched tightly but forgotten. He couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to occur, something that would change everything for him, his family, and possibly the entire Corinthos empire. It wasn't paranoia this time. It was instinct, and Michael had long since learned to trust it. Earlier that evening, he overheard Drew and Valentine's conversation in one of the Metro Court's secluded lounges. Their voices were low, urgent, and full of tension. Drew had been pushing harder than ever recently, his vendetta against certain key players becoming increasingly dangerous by the day. Michael wasn't sure who Drew was targeting right now, but he had no doubt that his adoptive uncle was playing a high-stakes game. And by the sounds of it, Drew was in far more trouble than anyone realized. Michael had tried to walk away, telling himself it wasn't his problem, but he couldn't shake the gnawing unease in his gut. So instead of returning home to Willow and the kids as promised, he found himself following Drew from a safe distance, blending into the shadows of the Metro Court parking structure. That's when he noticed it. Drew striding quickly across the lot, shoulders tense, head swiveling slightly as if he was being followed. Michael slowed his pace, staying just far enough back to avoid detection, his heart pounding in his chest. A black SUV was parked in the far corner, its windows tinted and the engine idling quietly. Something about the setup screamed trouble, but before Michael could process what was going on, it played out in front of him like a nightmare in slow motion. A figure emerged from behind the SUV, moving with deliberate precision, and the distinctive glint of metal caught the faint glow of the overhead light. Michael's breath caught in his throat. There was no time to react or intervene before the sharp crack of gunfire broke the silence of the night. Drew staggered, shock on his face as he clutched his side, blood seeping through his fingers. Michael froze, pressed against the cold concrete wall, his body screaming for him to move, to do anything. But the shooter did not hesitate. Another shot rang out, knocking Drew to the ground. The sound echoed throughout the parking garage, but it was as if the entire world had stopped in Michael's ears. He struggled to breathe, his entire body frozen in place as he tried to process what he had just witnessed. The shooter crouched over Drew for a moment, rifling through his pockets with chilling efficiency, before disappearing back into the SUV, tires screeching as it sped away into the night. Michael's instinct was to rush to Drew, but something stopped him, not fear for himself, but the creeping realization that whoever orchestrated this might still be watching and waiting. He pressed himself deeper into the shadows, forcing his breath out in slow, measured bursts until he was certain the danger had passed. Finally he moved, his sneakers squeaking softly on the concrete as he dashed to Drew's side. Drew was conscious but fading quickly, his breathing shallow and ragged. Michael dropped to his knees and pressed his hands over the wound, desperate to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me," he said softly, his voice cracking. "Don't you dare check out on me now." Drew's eyelids fluttered, his gaze barely focused, but he managed to rasp out something unintelligible, perhaps a name or a warning. Michael leaned in closer, but before he could process it, Drew's eyes rolled back and his body went limp. Panic gripped Michael's chest as he fumbled for his phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. He forced himself to remain calm, providing the dispatcher with as accurate information as he could about their location and Drew's condition. Every second felt like an eternity, with sirens in the distance taking far too long to arrive. When the paramedics arrived, Michael stumbled back and let them work while scanning the shadows of the parking structure, convinced that someone was still watching. His mind raced with possibilities. Was this connected to pikemen? To whom? Valentine. To someone else entirely? Or was this something more personal? Something hidden deep in Drew's past that had finally caught up with him? As the EMTs loaded Drew onto the stretcher, Michael made a snap decision. He wasn't about to tell anyone what he'd seen just yet. Not even Sunny. Not even Willow. Not until he realized what he was dealing with. He got into his car, gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white, and drove away without looking back. However, his thoughts would not stop spinning. If he had seen the shooter's face, and he was pretty sure he had, even if only for a split second, whoever was responsible for this might have realized they had a loose end to tie up. And Michael Corinthos had no illusions about what these people were capable of. Later that night, standing alone in the nursery, watching his children sleep soundly, Michael felt the weight of his decision bear down on him. He wanted to tell Willow everything to relieve himself, but he couldn't. Not yet. If Drew survived, and he had to believe he would, they'd get answers soon. But if Drew didn't make it, Michael knew he'd have to carry this secret alone. which could destroy everything he'd worked so hard to protect. Over the next few days, as news of Drew's shooting spread like wildfire throughout Port Charles, Michael kept his head down, pretending to be as shocked as everyone else. Sonny was furious, barking orders at his men and demanding answers. Carly was frantic, dividing her time between the hospital and her phone, attempting to piece together what had happened. Jason had gone silent, his icy calm masking the impending storm beneath the surface. Throughout it all, Michael watched and listened, carefully gathering information while ensuring no one realized how much he knew already. But the secret ate away at his sleep, appetite, and sanity. Drew's face remained pale and ghost-like under the harsh fluorescent lights in the final moments before the ambulance doors closed. One night, Michael drove back to the parking garage where it all happened, unable to bear the silence. He parked in the same location, retracing his steps slowly and methodically, as if replaying the events would reveal something he'd overlooked. He examined every shadow and corner, looking for any indication of who the shooter was or why Drew had been targeted. Then he discovered it. A single spent shell casing glinting faintly under one of the dim lights. He crouched down and turned it over in his fingers, instantly realizing it wasn't random. Whoever did this used military precision. This was not a mugging gone wrong. This was an execution. Michael pocketed the casing, his thoughts racing with possibilities. If Sonny learned of this, it would spark a war. But perhaps that was exactly what someone intended, to draw Sonny out, to destabilize everything and everyone connected to him. Drew remained unconscious in the hospital, hooked up to machines with his fate uncertain. Carly sat by his bedside day and night, refusing to leave, while Sam tried to remain composed for Scout's sake. Jason had been in and out, quiet but determined to find out who was responsible. Then there was Michael, who had a secret that could blow the entire investigation wide open, but was terrified of what would happen if he revealed it too soon. He'd seen enough to know one thing for certain: this was not over. Whoever pulled the trigger that night was still out there, watching, waiting, and possibly plotting their next moves. The question that haunted him every time he closed his eyes was simple but chilling. Had they seen him too? Because if they had, Michael Corinthos would no longer be just a witness. He was the target. As he stood at Drew's hospital door, staring through the glass, he silently promised himself. He was going to find out who had done this. He was going to reveal every hidden motive, secret, and betrayal. And once he did, there was no going back. But for the time being, Michael remained in the shadows as he had the night Drew was shot, waiting for the right moment to act, fully aware that time was running out. It was supposed to be a quick stop at the corner store for a pack of cigarettes and a soda. Michael hadn't wanted to go, but Drew insisted, flashing him that lopsided grin that always made it difficult to refuse. They had been friends since they were children, growing up in the same dilapidated apartment complex, sharing scraped knees and stolen sips of cheap beer from cans left behind by their parents. Drew was the reckless one, always chasing trouble like it was a game, while Michael trailed behind as the cautious shadow, always ready to pull him back from the brink. But tonight there was no turning back. Tonight the edge had discovered them. The alley was a shortcut they'd used 100 times before, cutting through the maze of brick buildings and flickering streetlights to save a few minutes on the walk. It was too quiet, the kind of silence that made the hairs on Michael's back stand up. Drew had not noticed, and even if he had, he didn't care. He was halfway through telling a story about a girl he met at the bar, his voice loud and careless, when the figure appeared out of the shadows. Michael noticed the gun first, a glint in the dim light of a street lamp, and his stomach dropped. He grabbed Drew's arm and attempted to pull him back, but it was too late. The shot rang out, deafening in the narrow alley, and Drew staggered, his story cut off in mid-sentence. Michael dove behind the dumpster, his knees scraping the pavement and his hands trembling as he pressed against the cold metal. He did not scream, move, or breathe. Drew fell, and he could only watch helplessly. The shooter did not linger. Michael caught a glimpse of their faces as they turned to run, the hood of their jacket slipping just enough to reveal features he was all too familiar with. It wasn't a stranger, nor a faceless thug from a rival crew. It was someone from their world, someone who had sat at the same tables, laughed at the same jokes, and traveled the same streets. Michael's mind reeled, attempting to make sense of it and put the pieces together, but the shock was too thick, like fog clouding his thoughts. He remained frozen there until the sound of footsteps faded and the alley fell silent again, except for the soft drip of water from a leaking pipe. When he finally moved, his legs felt like someone else's. He crawled to Drew's side, hands hovering over the body, afraid to touch or confirm what he already knew. Drew's eyes remained fixed on the sky, and the blood pooling beneath him was dark and slick, spreading like ink across the pavement. Michael whispered his name, a reflex and a plea, but there was no response. He reached for his phone, his fingers shaking so badly that he almost dropped it, and dialed 911. His voice cracked as he spoke, stumbling over his words while giving the operator the address. He didn't mention the shooter or describe what he had seen. The words were lodged in his throat, but they would not come out. Not yet. The police arrived quickly, their sirens blaring through the night, and red and blue lights painted the alley in stark, unnatural colors. Michael stood back, his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the ground as the officers swarmed the area. They questioned him about what he saw and heard, as well as whether anyone else was present. He replied in fragments, his voice flat, his mind elsewhere. He explained that he had been walking with Drew when they were jumped, and that everything happened so quickly. He didn't tell them about the shooter's face, or how the recognition burned like acid in his chest. He didn't trust himself to say it aloud, especially since he wasn't sure what it meant. They took Drew's body and placed it in a black bag, as if it were just another piece of evidence. Michael watched from the alley's edge, his breath fogging in the cold air and his mind replaying the shot moment by moment. He could still see the shooter's eyes, which had locked on Drew with a cold, deliberate focus. It was not arbitrary. It wasn't a botched robbery or a stray bullet from a gang dispute. It was personal, and Michael understood why. He simply didn't want to admit it. The days that followed were blurred. Michael remained in his apartment, the curtains drawn and the TV on in the background to drown out the silence. He didn't answer his phone or open the door when neighbors knocked, their voices soft and concerned. He kept seeing Drew's face, hearing his laugh and remembering how he'd always been present, a constant in a life that had never been easy. And he kept seeing the shooter, their face vivid in his mind, a name he couldn't bring himself to say. He understood what would happen if he spoke. This was not a neighborhood where you went to the cops if you wanted to stay alive. Snitches did not last long, and Michael had seen enough to understand how they worked. But it wasn't all about snitching. This was about betrayal, and the wound was deeper than any bullet. He tried to piece it together at night, lying awake and staring at the ceiling as the hours passed. Drew had gotten mixed up in things, debts, deals, and favors owed to the wrong people. Michael had warned him to stay out of it, but Drew always laughed it off and said he could handle it. Michael believed him, or at least wanted to. But now that Drew was gone, the truth could not be ignored. The shooter was no stranger. Drew had trusted them, and they were familiar with his habits, routes, and weaknesses. Michael had also been there, unintentionally serving as a witness and tying up loose ends.